All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get started here. Appreciate you all making the move from the Swank Student Center over here to the Rogers Fine Arts Center. As I was saying earlier, it's truly delightful to have you all back at Kiski. So many familiar faces who we haven't seen for a while, and you're here for such a good reason, and you're so complimentary of everything that's going on at the school. And as you know, truth is, we couldn't do it without our friends. We couldn't do it without our alumni, and we couldn't do it without our supporters and our fans who are all over the country, and we're just thrilled you took the time to be here tonight. So for a little bit of your time, we feel it's definitely our obligation to give you an update on the school. Headmaster Chris Bruningson is here to do that, so we're going to start off with that, and then we'll make our way into the presentations. So thank you again for being here.
Well, thanks. I'm so happy to welcome all of you back and add my congratulations to all of the people who are being honored tonight. We're so proud to be able to do it, and so very, very pleased to have you back with us. I'm going to do a very brief school update because we have a full program tonight. I'll start by talking about the class that just graduated, class of 2017, one of our biggest classes ever, 74 boys, which you know for Kiski is a really big class. And they did a great job of adding to what's been over the past few years a very, very solid list of college acceptances. So we're proud of that. We had great athletic seasons last year, 2016-17. We're off to a great start this year as well. Football is undefeated. I need some wood to knock on all over, but hopefully we'll be 5-0 tomorrow. But great results for last year. We had a Gatorade Athlete of the Year. We had some big wins in lacrosse, a nice football season. Soccer actually has become one of our very top teams now. I'll tell you that last spring, we had 21 boys sign letters of intent, NCAA letters of intent, which was a new record for us. So Kiski Athletics is alive and well. Tell you about a couple of recent projects that we've completed. Wait a minute, that's not. Scott Sheasley. Didn't look quite that bad in the before. This is the before picture for Sheasley. Many of you knew that as your freshman dormitory. Some of you, depending on your era, knew it as Fisher Hall. Some others may have known it as a vacant lot earlier, but that dorm has been completely transformed and is now called Hogue Hall, and we're real proud of that. Which means that, we've been talking about this for years, our beloved Clark Hall will be, sorry, Frank, when you were here, and I'm not joking, it was called, tell them what it was called. New Dorm. It's called New Dorm. Clark will be coming down later this month, so we've done additions to a number of dorms so that our inventory of housing is actually really first rate. If you have a chance to tour through any of the dorms, please do so. We also did a restoration of our pond, which is still in progress. We were calling this the Drain the Pond project, and that's going to definitely be a big improvement to the campus. We have a capital campaign that we're trying to close out now. This capital campaign, it feels like it's just been part of my life forever. It started really in 2012 as a $6 million campaign, and it's grown significantly. We're working to close out on $31 million in June. So it's been extraordinarily successful. When we started this campaign, I didn't have any children, and now I have 2. So it's been going on for a long time. But I'll show you that in yellow, these are the things that we completed during the last big capital campaign. The campus quad, the Swank Student Center, we renovated 2 dormitories. And then during this campaign, we did a big renovation addition to McCall Hall, where many of you may have lived when you were seniors. The big centerpiece was the new track and field and the new field house, new entryway. Just last spring, we finished, which was when many of you here in the 90s was called New Dorm, and has since been named after Zach Vallejos Hall. We did a renovation addition to it, and I mentioned we just completed a big renovation to Sheasley, now called Hogue Hall. So Clark Hall and the pond, by the way, and then Clark Hall will be taken down. In the spring, just a couple projects that we have left, we want to build 2 new homes on campus up on Faculty Row, and do a complete conversion of what used to be the old library and is now empty, to convert that into science labs, and also renovate our existing science labs in Heath Hall, and finally just some basic renovations and upgrades to the dining hall. So if you haven't had a chance to, if you haven't been back for a few years and you haven't had a chance to walk through the athletic center, please do. It's really a spectacular space. It's had a big impact on the campus. The one big piece that's out there that we're working to close out is this new Science and Engineering Center that's named for Jake Ziegler. Many of you know Jake was a teacher here for 42 years. So we're getting close. We're just about $2 million away from this $31 million goal. We couldn't have done any of this without you, obviously. So we appreciate your support. We appreciate your interest in Kiski, and we appreciate that you came back here tonight for this great program. So congratulations again to all the inductees, the individuals and the teams. And I'll turn things over to our athletic director, Chris Spahn.
All right. Good evening. Our first honoree is Tom Mintz. His plaque reads, "The notes accompanying Tom Mintz's senior portrait in the 1953 Kiski yearbook described him as Kiski's All-American boy, rated as one of the grid greats whose competitive spirit is non-pareil. Outstanding basketball player, destined for success both athletically and in his life's ambitions. Mr. Mintz was indeed an athletic juggernaut for Kiski as a standout contributor in all aspects of football play and on the basketball court. In basketball, he was the top offensive threat, scoring a Kiski record 39 points in one game, and also possessed remarkable rebounding prowess. He was perhaps known more for his football acumen. Mr. Mintz was a talented punter, receiver, and defender. His diverse talent helped him find fame with the University of Michigan before he was drafted 22nd overall by the Chicago Cardinals of the National Football League. Steve Szilagyi will speak on his behalf.
So I had the pleasure of talking with Tom a few times, and he was sorry he couldn't be here tonight. He had business travel obligations, but he did send a letter both to Chris and to me and asked that I would read that this evening so you all would understand his perspective on Kiski. So I'm going to do that. Dear gentlemen, it was a wonderful honor to have been selected to be inducted as a member of the 2017 Hall of Fame class for Kiski. However, I will be unable to attend the induction ceremony and the football game the next day. Please know that I have many fond memories of the Kiski School. My 1 year at Kiski was very helpful in preparing me academically and athletically for success at the University of Michigan. My football coaches, J.L. Marks and C. Lane, taught me solid fundamentals, discipline, and sportsmanship. We enjoyed victories over several college junior varsity teams. In the classroom, some of my favorite teachers included Ziegler, Brett, Hund, and Daub, all of them interesting and very knowledgeable. I am grateful for everything that Kiski has done for me. Sincerely, Tom. Thank you.
Our second inductee is Robert Fewheart. His plaque reads, "Before Mr. Fewheart was a four-sport stud for Army's Black Knights in football, basketball, baseball, and lacrosse, he accomplished similar notoriety as a Kiski boy, albeit with track replacing lacrosse. The Bob Mathias Award winner amassed 14 Kiski athletic letters. He was considered part of the basketball team's nucleus and is still ranked third all-time in the broad jump at the time of his Hall of Fame induction. Kiski's 1958 head prefect extended his capacity of leadership to the athletic field as the captain of the Kiski and Army football teams. Lieutenant Fewheart was killed in action in 1965, serving our country bravely in Vietnam. Speaking on his behalf is his daughter, Jamie Fewheart.
Thank you. Congratulations to all of tonight's inductees. I would also like to thank everyone for coming to help celebrate and support each of these outstanding men as they are recognized. Bob Fewheart was my father. Some of you may know my dad's story, but for those who don't, my dad was killed in Vietnam August 11, 1965. 7 years after leaving Kiski, 3 years after graduating from West Point, the same day I was born. I tell you this because I never knew my dad, and speaking about someone or on someone's behalf that you've never met can be a bit intimidating, but I am very honored. My dad was a loving son, a great brother, an extraordinary husband, and a fantastic friend. He was a passionate young man with an engaging personality, a big smile, and an even bigger dream. He wanted to go to West Point, and he knew Kiski was going to help him get there. I grew up hearing about the Fewheart-Kiski tradition. I was surrounded by Kiski men and Kiski stories. After all, my grandfather and his brother came here. Their father came here. 3 of my uncles came here, as did 2 of my cousins. With that many generations of Fewhearts, chances are some of you may know at least one of them. The Fewhearts by nature are a fiercely competitive bunch. They love to be challenged, any sport, any time, and my dad was no different. Earlier, you heard a list of his accomplishments. To say sports was a prominent part of his life would be an understatement. He would strive for excellence, whether he was water skiing with his brothers, golfing with my mother, on the football field, or on the track. He was a natural athlete full of potential. Thankfully, Kiski encouraged his intense competitive spirit and his incredible drive. Being able to do the things he did here on the field and on the track are a true testament to the lessons he learned about hard work, teamwork, and commitment. Kiski helped prepare him for the pressures and the dedication he would need to succeed as Army's lonesome end and being named first-team All-American in lacrosse. I believe he would tell you that he made a name for himself here. He built his confidence in himself here, and I'm sure he would laugh while telling you that his successes helped to motivate those 2 competitive brothers that would eventually follow him here. They were always competing. And there must be something to that competition thing, as each of the brothers went on to succeed in their own right. One is a teacher, a pioneer in the cable TV industry, and a farmer. One is a pilot and a distinguished law enforcement officer. And one as a captain in the Army who was awarded a Purple Heart, a Silver Star, and a Bronze Star for Valor. Tonight we are here to recognize my dad, Bob Fewheart, for his abilities on the field, but I would also like to acknowledge all that he loved about Kiski, because for my dad, Kiski was about so much more than just athletic achievements. I know he would have wanted to acknowledge and thank all of his teachers, and especially Mr. Pigeon. He and Mr. Pigeon shared a very unique mutual admiration for each other, and because of their relationship, Mr. Pigeon became a significant part of the Fewheart-Kiski tradition and story. The education he received here allowed him to fulfill his dream of becoming a West Point cadet. He was inspired to learn, and he excelled in the lessons of self-discipline, leadership, critical thinking, and the importance of integrity, character, and brotherhood. The athlete and the student was challenged and encouraged to reach his fullest potential on and off the field. Kiski helped shape that boy into the man he was to become, an excellent student, an outstanding athlete, an exceptional leader of men, the epitome of a real Kiski man. My dad accomplished much in 26 years. He made the most of his short life. He took advantage of the opportunities he was given and worked hard for all that he achieved. He would have been proud to stand here tonight with all of the other Hall of Famers. He would have been honored to be included amongst all of these phenomenal athletes, those that came before him and those that came after him. He would have applauded each of your legendary performances, and he would have loved sharing in your stories. So thank you on behalf of my father and myself. All of you will be forever remembered for your hard work, dedication, and excellence. Congratulations to each of you on representing the best of the Kiski School traditions. Thank you.
Our third inductee is Brad Henry. His plaque reads, Brad Killer Henry, class of 1974, was a dominant runner who may not have had the opportunity to excel were it not for concussions that ended his promising football career, and the sage advice of mentor headmaster Jack Pigeon. Mr. Henry's running ability and recruited him for track and cross country after it was credited his time a deft running back and abruptly concluded with a concussion. He was an instant success in cross country, tallying 5 wins his junior year and finishing first in all races, but won his final year. As a senior track athlete, he tied the 1-mile record and set the 2-mile record that remains at the time of his Hall of Fame induction. Mr. Henry won Kiski's William H. McKillop Award, the Bob Mathias Award, the Headmasters Award, and the St. Andrew Society Award. Mr. Henry.
All clear to go?
You're all set to go.
I normally don't speak from notes because the teachers that were here know I'm ADD and dyslexic. I think Mr. DiOrio was the first to find that out and knew he had some troubles. But I want to thank the selection committee. It's such a huge honor, not because of what I did, but because of the institution that the honor comes from. 60 some years ago on this earth, this is my most cherished award. I started here in 1970, and I was fortunate enough, my dad had been a 52 graduate, and he had died of a heart attack at 34 the year before I came. So, needless to say, I needed a role model, I needed some boundaries, and who better but Mr. DiOrio, who was an imposing figure, not imposing, scary figure. If you saw him on one side of the court, everybody would go the other way to the dining hall. But he taught me character. I was a runner that learned how to go through pain. Mr. Pigeon taught me that, but something about football that taught me character. And I loved football, but my head didn't. And after 3 concussions my sophomore year, fortunately, Mr. DiOrio had us run a mile to see what shape we were in preseason, and I did it in something like 5 minutes and 40 seconds. So Mr. Pigeon was watching, and he's like, I don't think I want you playing football. So that was a start of a change, really a life change for me. As I thought about what to say tonight, and the reason I'm reading some notes is because there's too many important people that helped me tonight to get here. Kiski's, its faculties and teammates helped me to believe that anything was possible. I need to thank people like body, who I threw up on numerous times after he caught me at the finish line. Fabian, Handrahan, Nanny, Vallejos, Ziegler, Turley, Neal, Stokes, Brett, and actually all the faculty. You know, everyone here tried to build into my life. When we're students here, we want to get out and conquer the world. If escaping at night, that's an option. But boy, when we leave here, we wish we had those years back to do over again. To my teammates, Pat Kelly, Mark Schmidt, Swinford, Prusak, my brother Jeff, they never gave up on me, and we never gave up on each other. Mr. Pigeon, and that's one man I truly miss tonight. Everybody has stories that he changed their life, and he certainly changed mine. But he was brutal on workouts. We'd do 20 laps around the track with a lap jog in between. And then we'd have a mile warm up and a mile warm down, and then we thought we were done. Then he'd take us to the ski slope and run up that 3 times. So he pushed us beyond what we ever thought we could do. And that's kind of what running had taught me, was there are no limits. We impose our own limits upon ourselves. And Kiski really is the only place in the world truly that taught me that there are no limits, especially for a kid that was told he was dumb and wouldn't amount to anything before I got here. So when I got to Maryland, University of Maryland, I went to run there, and I lettered as a freshman and was doing, it really went well. I lettered in the ACC championship team and did 28-10 in a 10K. So I was on my way to the time for the Olympic trials in '76. But something happened that year. I started looking ahead at my life, and I didn't have anybody there. It was only a phone call to Mr. Diorio and Mr. Pigeon, but they weren't there every day. And here I now have 40,000 people and 20,000 girls around. So I just went off course. And I look back, and there's this magical place along the Kiski River. That is a place where young men are grown into Kiski boys. I don't like to say Kiski men, I like to say Kiski boys because I'm proud to be one. And this award tonight, only by the grace of God am I thankful that I was able to run, but more importantly, I'm thankful for the faculty here, because I suffered with depression for many years, and it got so dark at times that it was you here who truly saved my life. And I want to thank you tonight for that. And those teachers who go and teach on Monday, please know that when you go in on Monday, there are students there who will remember you till the day they die. And you are making a huge impact in the most influential years of their lives. And I am proud to be a Kiski boy as much as I am to get this award. But this award tonight is as much yours as it is mine. So thank you, Kiski.
Jeff Urbany, class of 1980, was an athletically gifted Kiski boy who left his mark as a football, wrestling, track and field, and baseball letter winner. Although Mr. Urbany played key roles with a pair of football interstate prep school league championship teams, He was best known for his skills in the wrestling mat. He won the National Prep Wrestling Championships at 109 pounds in 1979 and 1980, with the latter title culminating in a 27-0 season. Mr. Urbany was a senior captain for both football and wrestling at Kiski. He continued his high-level athletic achievement at Princeton University, where he was the captain of the football team and tallied 3 letters in football and 4 as a wrestler. Mr. Jeff Urbany.
Picture time first. How cool is this? All right, get comfortable. It's going to be here a while. Just kidding. I promise. Thanks, Chris, for that very kind introduction. I'll start by saying, as a kid growing up, I dreamed of being inducted to the Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. I guess the Hall of Fame in Salzburg is probably the next best thing, and I'm glad I brought my own jacket tonight. But suffice it to say, I'm very honored and very humbled to be before you all this evening. As I thought about what I would say tonight, I kept coming back to the feeling that I had to simply stand before you and thank a group of people, very special people, who helped pave the way for me to be here tonight. Top of my list is my mom and dad, who made one of their best parenting decisions in bringing me here to Kiski. At the time, I was at a very large public high school and was trending in a less than positive direction, both academically and with some of my extracurricular decisions. So my Kiski journey started when my dad and I visited here one spring day, and the most vivid memory of our visit was sitting at Mr. Brett's table for lunch that featured BLTs and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. At the time, the food presentation was most impressive, featuring a platter of bacon strips dripping with grease, accompanied by a stack of white bread and a plate of lettuce and tomatoes. It sure made me appreciate Mom's home cooking. My mom and dad were my best cheerleaders, traveling to almost every football game or wrestling match while I was here and then at Princeton. They were always there for me, and I have done the same with my own children. Sadly, my mom passed some time ago, but thankfully my dad is still with us and is here tonight to cheer me on again. And for that, Dad, I say thank you. Our relationship isn't currently what either of us, I think, would like, but know that I love you and greatly appreciate all that you have done for me and Fran. With a decision to leave the comforts of Washington, D.C. suburbs for the shores of the Kiski Menotis, I was welcomed by one of the most impactful people of my life, the great Reno DiOrio. As I wrote this address, I truly struggled to find the prose to adequately depict all that Reno was for me here. Coach, counselor, teacher are just a few of the roles that he played. I learned very early on that being on Reno's good side was the best place to be. The man had an index finger made of steel that he loved to poke in one's chest with extreme prejudice to make his point. And his point was that you messed up and don't do it again or else. Reno taught me that I could be pushed, and maybe more importantly, that I wanted to be pushed beyond what was easy, and that I could do hard things, like running a mile or 1,740 yards of wind sprints at the end of our Wednesday practices. Thank you. Or joining the Glee Club. Well, I can't say I really joined. As I recall it, I was told it would be good for me. Thanks, Reno, and sorry, Mrs. Vlahos. One memory of Reno that sums him up, was when I returned to campus for the start of my football camp junior year. I had just unpacked and said my goodbyes to Mom and Dad when Reno and Jack pulled up outside McClintock Hall in Jack's golf cart, and Reno asked me how my summer had been. I told him, well, it had been great. My 40 time was down, my bench press, deadlift, and squats were all up. He was unimpressed. He then asked me how I had done on my SAT and AC tests during the summer. I told them that both had improved, not a lot, but now they were both greater than 0. His reaction was immediate, jumping out of the golf cart, putting me in a headlock, punching me in the arm, and saying, now that's what's important. And Jack grinned and said, good job, Herbs. Reno taught me what it is to lead and the joy of winning. When Reen's machine rolled through the ISPLs and won the first football title for Kiski in quite a long time. It was Rain's Machines that was recently inducted to the Football Hall of Fame a few years ago, so technically, this is my second induction to the Hall of Fame. Just saying. Reno also helped me deal with a little bit of adversity and disappointment when he left for Lindsley Academy at the start of my senior year, leaving me with Bernie Colbert. All I'll say about that is that Bernie was no Reno DiOrio. Thank you, Terry Giffen, my wrestling coach, dorm master, college counselor, teacher, and friend. Like with Reno, I can't adequately articulate all that Mr. Giffen was for me here. As I think about Mr. Giffen, I think about how he developed me by the trust he placed in me, the trust to lead, to work hard, to do the right thing, to represent myself and Kiski with grace, humility, and the trust to understand that championships are won when no one is watching. Wrestling has a culture that only those who have embraced the sport truly understand. In an effort to give you some insight to the connection I shared with Mr. Giffen, I recall a brief interaction we had at the end of the winter sports banquet my senior year. I was being recognized by Mr. Giffen for my accomplishments that season, but my campaign was far from over as the national prep tourney loomed ahead while school was on spring break. As Mr. Giffen shook my hand and gave me my award, he looked me in the eyes and quietly said, "Jeff, this is nice, but you have many miles to travel before you sleep." And indeed I did. And together, we won a second national prep title together. Thank you, Terry. And so many other Kiski family members to thank who made my time here so special, such as Mr. Depew, such a great coach and teacher, Mr. Stokes, for instilling the proper use of the words good and well, and that the word get, used properly, only means to receive. Mr. Brett for teaching both my dad and me a little bit of French, Mrs. Vlahos and Mr. Vlahos for the love of music and history, Mrs. Millar and Mr. Millar for teaching me how to read and write, Mr. Salaji for being Mr. Salaji, Mr. Nanny for being Mr. Nanny, Mr. Bauer for being one of the best teachers that my son Zach and I ever had, Mr. Turley for the conversations we had at the head table during our meals, and finally Mr. Ziegler, who helped coach me up on my headbutt, takedown, and pin wrestling techniques when the Kiski bus would break down on the way home from a match, which was a common occurrence. As I speak of family, I must also thank my immediate family. My wife, Cindy, who I've been with for a short 32 years, has been the most amazing partner and mother in the universe, at least my universe. Together, we proudly got our 3 kids through college, and I'm here to brag about it. Sorry, Mr. Stokes. I meant to say that we put our 3 kids through college, and I couldn't be more proud of the adults that they have become. Cindy, we did a good job. I'm very proud that my 2 sons, Zach and Cooper, are both Kiski boys that I know Jack and Reno would be proud of, as I am. And their older sister, Taylor, had she been a boy, I know she would have been one heck of a Kiski boy as well. With all that said, I now look up and say my thanks to Mr. Pigeon. He was simply the man. All who were fortunate enough to have had him in their lives as I was know exactly what I mean. His iron will and the love for Kiski boys made this place so special for us. But while I thank Mr. Pigeon for my Kiski, I must also thank you, Chris, for my boys' Kiski. You and your staff have done a wonderful job building upon Jack's foundation, and for that, I thank you. Lastly, when I started at Kiski, it was required that we buy a box of 1,000 vocabulary cards from the bookstore. I remember the word on the very first card in that box, and it was permeate, which all Kiski grads should know means to pervade or pass through. Well, that's what Kiski has done with me. Kiski continually pervades and passes through me and my family, and we are all better for it. Thank you again for this honor and speaking to you tonight, and go Cougars.
The 1981 golf team collected 19 wins before their only loss by 1 point during the last match of the season. Although their average margin of team victory was nearly 24 strokes per 9-hole contest, their phenomenal overall record included several matches that came down to the final hole. A recipe of team consistency mixed with individual heroics kept Kiski ahead of the competition through almost the entire season. Captain Arnold Cottrell paced the squad with a 9-hole average of 37, followed closely by Christopher Campisi, 38, Michael Dowell, 40, and John Taylor, 41. Mark Orsatti will speak on behalf of the 1981 golf team.
Good evening. Thank you. One side note for the many of you out there who may have put the occasional golf ball into the pond, please see me after this ceremony. I have them all. 22,000 golf balls. And many of them are mine, actually. A little audience participation. How many of you out there play golf? Please raise your hand. Okay, that's not as many as I expected. How many of you are actually golfers? Fewer hands. Notice I raised my hand on the first one, but not on the second one. I play golf. I am not a golfer. But as the current golf coach and a teacher from the same era as this team, I was only 5 years old when I was teaching here. Oh, I'm sorry, that's 25. Sorry. I've been given the honor of accepting this award on behalf of this class of 1981 golf team, class of 82, the 81 golf team. In the months leading up to this evening, I've been in touch with the 81 golfers, mostly Arnie Cottrell, who still lives near here. These guys are scattered across the nation, and for many understandable reasons, ranging from giving a niece away in a wedding to childcare to celebrations of all kinds, they're unable to join us this weekend. They all expressed regret and very much pride in being selected to the Hall of Fame. The most talented golfer from the team and captain, Arnie Cottrell, as I said, is still in the area and is playing competitively, still, and recently qualified for the U.S. Mid-Am. For those of you who are non-golfers, the U.S. Mid-Am, if you're not a professional, that's the place you want to play. He was an alternate to the Mid-Am team, and someone had to drop out, so he got to take that spot. And he left a couple days ago for the Capital City Club in Atlanta, and will tee off tomorrow afternoon at 2:09. So if you look up the U.S. Mid-Am on the internet, you'll find Arnie listed there. We have great hopes for him, and hope he'll be fine there. Accepting this on behalf of the 81 golf team is really a simple assignment. This team was dominant, and they were consistent. And only in my role in recent years as golf coach have I come to fully appreciate this, because as I said, I'm a player, not a real golfer. Their coach, Lee Crawford, is a legend at Kiski, and he was himself the heart of the team, as I remember them, but he was able to lean, as most of us coaches do, lean on a steady foundation of Arnie Cottrell, Chris Campisi, Mike Dowell, and John Taylor. Those guys in the picture look good. But he would need, as we all do as coaches, you need that core, plus you need some other guys to participate, and positive rounds from teammates Gene Arnold, Phil Erickson, Randy Faust, Mark Miller, Mike Urich, to reach a 19-1 record. And 19-1 is just ridiculously good. Golf is considered typically an individual sport, kind of like wrestling and tennis, where you play your own match, but then your scores all add up for the team score. It's also been characterized, golf has, as a series of frustrating errors punctuated by the occasional miracle. That's my game. These guys were the opposite. They had a series of miracle shots punctuated by the occasional error, and must have been just a joy to watch. At the end of the day, when the golf match is over, the win can fall, the chance of securing the win can fall to just one golfer, one hole, one stroke. Usually in our matches, we'll play 5 or 6 golfers and score 230, 300 strokes, and it comes down to one to decide the match. There were 3 instances during the 1981 golf season when the win hung in the balance and weighed heavily on the shoulders of one final golfer, and one stood out in particular, one day in particular. Kiski squared off against our biggest rival of that period. I can't say it. We know who it is, and it shall not be named. I kind of expected a chorus of boos right there, but we faced off against them 3 times. And those of us who have been involved in athletics know that beating a team once is a challenge. Beating a team twice in the same season is a bigger challenge. Beating a team 3 times in the same season is just crazy. So after narrowly escaping a win after the first meeting, Kiski was in an even tighter battle for the second contest. The top 4 for each school tied, and Phil Erickson was left to pull out Kiski to victory. After his teammates finished the rounds, this happens a lot in golf, the last guys coming in typically are not the number 1, 2, 3, 4 golfers, it's the 4 or 5 or 6 golfers. He knew, even in his position as the 5th or 6th golfer, that any mistake he would make would give that other school the win and halt their 17-0 season. His play held up, and the streak of perfection reached 18. Unbelievable. Now, that school, that we shall not name, did end up defeating Kiski for their final match of the season, and our boys look back on that match even today. They still remember it. It's hard to believe that 6 years later, we still remember matches that happened way back then. I could see all the faces in the crowd going, oh yeah, we remember a lot. The golfers I spoke with recalled their rivalry fondly with that school. Maybe fondly is not exactly the right word, because that last game of the season for football and the matches we've had in soccer and basketball were not friendly sometimes. And Randy Faust, a member of the team, added that they often saw some of those golfers from that other school during other sports season, which only strengthened that rivalry that we all know going back for so long. Excuse me. Seasons like the one the 1981 golf team had and coaches like Lee Crawford are rare. And I truly appreciate this now as a golf coach. It's extremely rare. It was a joy to follow their conquest as I was coaching soccer at the time, and it's fun to share the stories of dominant Kiski performances with my team today, the 10 golfers I have in my van this season. When I told the guys this week that this team was 19-1, they just looked at me like, how's that possible? I said, well, because they were good. They were really good. They worked hard at it. The accomplishments of the 1981 team are striking, awesome, and inspiring, and it is fitting that they be the first golf team from Kiski to be inducted into our Hall of Fame. I congratulate all those guys, and I am humbled to be here speaking on their behalf. Thank you.
Next up, the 1994 track and field team. The undefeated Interstate Prep School League champion 1994 track and field team won each dual meet by an average score of 85 points. This was arguably the most complete and deepest team during a dominant decade for the Kiski track and field. The 1994 squad won the IPSL championship by capturing titles in every field event and 11 of the 16 events overall. In doing so, Kiski scored more points than that of the other 4 teams combined. Current coach Doug Yoder, who was coached way back in '94, will give a few remarks now.
We do that first.
Ooh, thank you. I was really coaching that long ago? I don't know. And it's nice to see some of the old team back again. Darren, Brett, Jimmy. There's some more in there I'd see. John. Yeah, there's a lot of them. Ryan. Too many. But I do want to thank that team for allowing me to come up here to speak tonight. As most of you know, we have a long and storied history of track and field here at Kiski, with many great teams, hundreds of great athletes, but perhaps the most dominant decade for Kiski track and field was the 90s. Not the 1890s, but the 1990s. I can remember the 1890s as well. But in that decade, one team, the spring team of 1994, somehow rose above the great teams that preceded them and was unmatched by any that followed. And there are several members of the team, that 94 team, that were on the team from freshman till senior years. And if you would ask them to, say, recollect something about the season and say, oh, tell me about the ones that you lost, and they say, duh, I can't remember, it's not because they have that old age memory loss like some of us do, but it's because there were no losses to remember. So they were the tops of the decade. And at the start of that season, I, along with the rest of my coaching staff, we knew we had a pretty good team ready to go, but we weren't sure of how dominant they really were going to be. We had no idea. But we didn't have to wait long for that group of young men to tell us that they meant business. And I remember the afternoon, it was a cold, damp, typical, snow flurry, early April afternoon. I think it was a Thursday, first meet of the season. But before I tell you a little bit about the season and how it went, I just have to clue you in on some of the details of how track meets are scored, in case you don't know. In a dual meet, a head-to-head competition between two teams, there are 150 points that are there to be earned, and they have to be split between the two teams. So obviously, if you win or get 76 points, of course you win. And then if you're able to score 100 points, that's generally considered a blowout. So, by most people, that's pretty much what we think. Well, that first meet, I think it was maybe, I can't remember what team came to town that day, but the team scored 103 points. Remember, 100's a blowout, so we had 103. And as it turned out, that was our lowest point total of the season. That was followed by meets where we scored, in order, 129, 115, 110, 135, 115, 135 again, 111, 109. Whoo! And remember, there's only 150 to go around. That last 109 was our last dual meet of the season against our now rivals, Mercersburg Academy. The 94 team didn't confine themselves to just winning dual meets. The team had a great invitational season as well. That year we hosted the Fort Pitt Invitational, 15 teams. They won. 2 weeks later, they went down to Altoona for the prestigious West Central Coaches Meet, which has been going on since, believe it or not, I ran in that meet when I was in high school. So it's been going on for a long time. They went down there and bested the 25 teams in that competition. But you might ask, what makes that team stand out above all the other undefeated teams that we've had here at Kiski in all areas of athletics, whether it be football, golf, soccer, whatever? What made that team stand out was really the story of the IPSL championship that year. That's when our league, the Interstate Preparatory School League, was a big deal in those days. That league has since dissolved, but I know a lot of you remember that league and the tough competitions that we've had there. So that's sort of a story which I know it every day. I think of it every day. In those days, you weren't able to find out what the other teams were doing, what their times were, what their distances were. We didn't know. Today, you can get online and find everything. In those days, we didn't know until the day of the meet. But a few days prior to the meet, you had to send in your entry time so that they could seed the meet. And then you arrive at the coaches' meeting, an hour before the start of the meet, and the host team would hand out the seeds so you would see where everybody was and what was going on. Well, that particular coaches' meeting, I was the last head coach to walk into the room, and as I walked in, my colleagues from the other schools were already looking at me and congratulating me and saying, why don't you just take the trophy now and go home? So they obviously had seen the seed times before I did. But those of us that are coaches, we know that what's on paper doesn't always come out when it goes out onto the competition field. In that case, however, reality proved to be even a little bit better. The way we conducted that meet in those days is that the field events, the throws and the jumps, were all competed and completed before the track event started. Not only did Kiski win every field event, we took 2 and 3 places in almost all those field events. And by the time the field events were done, before the track events even started, at that point, we could have gotten on the bus with the trophy and come home. No one else could catch us. Whew. That had never been happened in the 80-plus years that that competition has been going on. No team has ever dominated the field like that. And although those of us that were coaching at that point, we were starting to feel a little bit sorry for those other teams, so we decided to ease it up a little bit when it came to the track events. So at that point, we only placed first or second, sometimes both, in 9 of the 11 remaining events. So we took it easy on them. In the end, all the other team scores combined couldn't match what the Kiski boys put up on the scoreboard. It was the most dominating track and field performance I've seen. Even 2 days ago, Mr. Muffley was even talking to me about it. He remembered he was there as the AD and helping run the event, and he's still amazed at that. What a great group of guys. And even today, 23 years later, the members of that team still hold at least a dozen spots on the Kiski all-time track and field performance list, and one of them is still a school record, which I know he's not here, but Micah McQuigg, if you guys remember him, broke Bob Mathias's 45-year-old shot put record during that season. I'm truly honored to have been a small part of that history-making Hall of Fame track team. Thank you. Could members of that team please come forward? We need to get a picture of you. Anybody on that team? Some of these guys were sophomores, some freshmen, some seniors that year. Oh, Brian, I forgot. The best discus catcher we had. Nice job.
Our last team tonight is the 1994 football team. The 1994 football team compiled a record of 7-1 while capturing the Interstate Prep School League Championship. Curtis Enos fueled the offense, averaging 10 yards per carry, but Kiski needed a complete effort to convert that dominance into wins. It was the defense that stopped Lindsley from scoring from within 10 yards of the goal line 3 times to preserve that close victory against a powerful rival. Their sole loss to a physically superior Valley Forge Military Academy may have been their most impressive performance. The Cougars battled back from an early 14-0 deficit while holding the Trojans to 61 yards of offense the rest of the day. 11 Cougars from this championship roster went on to play college football. Coach Marcus Marshall will make a few remarks.
Thanks, Chris. Oh, picture time. So these were all tough acts to follow. I'll do my best. It's certainly an honor to be asked to speak on behalf of the 94 football team. Taking a few minutes to jot down some initial thoughts this week, it became apparent quickly that for as much as my short-term memory fails me these days, I have very tangible and distinct memories of this team. First, I think, I would like to acknowledge, we need to acknowledge that more than 75% of this team played for or coached with College Football Hall of Fame coach Chuck Clousing, Kiski Hall of Fame coach Chuck Clousing. Coach was my mentor. He was my college coach. And for the majority of the players that were on this team, he was their coach. My job in '94 when I took over after Chuck retired was don't screw it up. Don't screw up what he started, when we both came back in 1987. Coach couldn't be here tonight. I visit him as often as I can. He's a young 92 years old, and he wanted me to make sure that I wished congratulations to all those who are being inducted tonight to the Hall of Fame. I feel it's important to mention this because I just happen to be the default guy at the podium tonight. Tonight's about recognizing all of the great Hall of Fame athletes and, for us and for me, our 94 team. So the first few words I typed out, when I was on duty Tuesday night, thinking about what I might say were unselfish, hardworking, and you can read it, why in the world would they ever listen to some 29-year-old head coach? And then as I started to type, it was pretty easy to think back and reflect. Unselfish. We had players on this team who moved positions to help our team. We had an offensive guard move to a running back. We had starters from the year before who gave up playing time, moved to other positions. We asked an all-state tailback to play fullback in the wing T. We moved offensive linemen to defensive linemen to linebackers, and somehow we found a way to appease everybody and make it work. And get this, we did it without anybody caring about their statistics, how many stars they had, what their ranking was on Max Preps or on ESPN's watch list. And when I think of hardworking, right, we had coaches like Bo Buren developing and teaching schemes on defense that were totally new to our guys. We had kids asking to be on special teams because we had Coach Raleigh Young, who was selling to the boys the importance of what special teams meant and how it was as important as anything else that we do. We had coaches like Muffley and Young Diorio who were coaching their kids' tails off and bringing structure and pride to the positions that they worked with. And get this, all the players worked hard and did whatever we asked them to do. And, maybe it was because it was a sign of the times, I'm not sure, but they never questioned anything we did. And in the end, I know this, we all wanted to win. And that was important. We had each other's back. I know that for sure. And, I'll mention this again about Coach Clousing. He taught all of us the value of being prepared. Players and coaches, I think that resonates with all of us whoever knew him. And, for me, that's a great life lesson. Be prepared, be unselfish, work hard. And that's what I think about when I think about this 94 team. So early in camp, when practice was over, we'd line up and we'd run fifths. We'd run a mile. We'd run 5 fifths, right? And we did it because that's what we always did. And at some point, Coach Young says, can we do something else? Can we change it up? And he was right. We needed to kind of find our own identity. And so I don't know if it was when we were running a 100-yard dash or a 40-yard dash or Coach Young's gladiator drill, which if you want me to explain it someday, I will, which is pretty interesting. Somebody on our team said, I can't wait for that first Saturday. It's going to be a great day. And I don't know who said it, but the minute I heard it, that became our mantra for the year. It's going to be a great day. And the first away game on the road, we're in a hotel, and multiple players on our team, went to the hotel lobby computer, and they scribbled out, it's going to be a great day. In like old ASCII art, you remember the dot matrix printers, before there was digital photography. And they printed that and they slipped it underneath my door. And that's what I found the next morning when I woke up. It's going to be a great day. And I can tell you right then, I knew there would be no way that we would lose that football game. I knew we'd be 1-0, and we'd come home with our first victory of the year. And sure enough, we did. You know what I also remember, though? How the Penn Charter community treated one of our players. And I'll never forget how our players respectfully backed that player up, and how they behaved and how they acted was Hall of Fame. I remember another overnight trip in Baltimore to Riverdale Baptist. I remember Muffley and DiOrio standing on top of an old school bus in a pasture that they called a football field with their headphones on, trying to give us advice. And I remember somebody changing the play in the huddle, although they swear that they didn't do it. I remember our players eating cupcakes that our wives would make for those away trips. And we'd meet out by the bus, and we'd take them off the bus, and I can remember seeing the icing all over their faces and all over their fingers. And I remember thinking back then, sometimes you forget, they're still just kids. And that's because they behaved and they practiced and they played like grown men. I remember that super close Lindsley game. I remembered we figured out at some point how to get them to misalign with a new formation. I remember Coach Buren dialing up some crazy defenses at the end to stop them. I recall our matchup with Western Reserve. We were both 5-0. And one of our players in a film session during the week figured out, not a coach, a player figured out that when they substituted a certain personnel set, we knew they were going to run a reverse. And son of a gun, here come number 82. And they ran the reverse, and our cornerback picked it off in midair and ran it back for a touchdown. I do remember losing by 2 to Valley Forge in what was quite possibly the best high school game I was ever a part of. As Coach Clausing would say, time just ran out. We just needed another quarter, and we'd have come back and won. So again, I can't remember what I had for lunch, but I can remember these highlights, and I can remember many more. And to the players that are here tonight, yes, I still have every game you played on VHS tape, but do you have a VHS player to play that tape? I don't know, right? And yes, we can watch the Valley Forge game at my house later tonight. I already have it in my VCR. But let me clue you in on a secret. We're still going to lose, right? We're still going to lose. Later tonight, and I'm sure into tomorrow morning, early tomorrow morning, we'll still be sharing stories that aren't appropriate for this venue. And I've talked long enough, but I'd just like to just leave you with 2 quick thoughts. The first one I'm going to call my happy Mr. Pigeon syndrome. To the average observer, no one has a real understanding, unless you've been involved with it, no one has a real understanding of the time and the commitment that the players and the coaches and the support staff put into, a 3-hour game that's played 8 or 9 times a year. And, in 94, our efficiency probably wasn't that great, as we were all young and getting used to it. And, technology and football were in its infancy. And we'd spend 20, 30 hours a week, whether we were breaking down film or, we were practicing with the boys and the boys were practicing, and we would having meetings in the evening after study hall, and all that we would do to find time to practice and to meet and readjust through the week. It's hard work. And, I point this out because in 94, our players, they bought into it all. As we've said before, they never complained. If nothing else, we were striving for one goal, personal goals irrelevant, playing time being shared, egos put aside. In the end, we were winning because the players trusted the process, and they trusted the system, and most importantly, they trusted each other. Most importantly, they trusted each other. Excuse me. That team played with pride and purpose, and I think we could use more of that today in all facets of life. And sure, the winning was fun, but I don't know how many of us actually knew how really happy we were back then. I think at the time we were all tired and sore. Class, we felt overworked, homework, all that we had to do. And yet, looking back now, I know for certain, as Mr. Pigeon used to say, I didn't realize it then. It was the happiest time of my life. It was one of the happiest times of my life. And I think it's safe to say, for many of us, it was the happiest time. So So let me just give you some quick numbers. As Mr. Spahn said, we had 11 players on this team that went on to play college football. You know, we have a current college Division I football coach who's a defensive coordinator. And, you know, we have a former NFL player that was on our team. Those are pretty solid Hall of Fame numbers. But to be sure, what I'm most proud of, and I think why the 94 team deserves this honor in my opinion, here are the real Hall of Fame numbers. We have no fewer than 3 doctors that played on that team. We have countless business owners, presidents, CEOs, vice presidents, company managers, dedicated employees who are all great fathers and husbands and family men, and they're good people. And in the end, they're Kiski boys. They're true Kiski boys. And I'm humbled to represent this group of talented football players, but more importantly, a group of people I feel fortunate to have been and continue to be associated with, including our coaches, their families, my own family, and these men and their families. So I thank you, and at this point, I'd like to have members of the team come up to the stage. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight, and tomorrow at halftime of the football game, all the inductees will be honored again. Thank you. Have a good night.